Investment advisory services offered through SWAN-Capital Management, LLC, a SEC-registered investment advisor. SWAN-Capital Management, LLC, and SWAN-Capital are independent entities.
What your money would say. Andrew McNair. Money Talks. Are you listening? Money Talks. Are you listening? Money Talks. Are you listening? What your money would say with Andrew McNair.
We're live here on What Your Money Would Say. I'm your host, Andrew McNair, and for the next 30 minutes, every Saturday from 12:30 to 1 o'clock, we're going to be taking financial chickens and making them financial swans. Because I believe as a retiree, you deserve to sleep well at night. And that's exactly what SWAN stands for, sleep well at night. And no longer should you be in your golden years of retirement being just a chicken little. And we're going to talk about some very important topics that may keep up a lot of retirees up at night. Like, we talk about taxes. Don't worry about April 15th. Don't worry about the stock market going to another 2008. And finally, which goes along with today's show, is worrying about your estate planning. Worrying about when you check out of this world, how is your plan going to end up? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about on today's show. Now, in the meantime, I want to share with you some upcoming events we have here at SWAN-Capital. And the first one is our Social Security Class 101 at the University of West Florida, November 12th at 6 o'clock. So it's going to be a 2-hour class at UWF where we're going to be taking you back to school and we're going to be talking about Social Security, a topic that every retiree at age 55 to 60 needs to be thinking about what decision should I make? Should I take it at 62, 66, or 70? Is Social Security going to be there? For something called Social Security, sometimes it really makes us insecure with all the government being in such disarray over its finances. And then finally, we're going to answer an important question as if Social Security is one of the few income sources you have to depend on, let's maximize your benefits so you can get every dollar that you're entitled to from Social Security. And we've been successful in helping families get upwards of $80,000 to $100,000 more from Social Security. No magic there, just making sure that they use the rules that are available and maximizing their Social Security benefits to get those extra dollars that they're entitled to. So you don't want to miss that class. You can check out more information at SWAN-Capital.com. That's SWAN-Capital.com. Now remember, the show is live, so you can call in at 478-3116 at any time throughout the show. The phone lines are open. Also, I want to share with you one more event, and that is our Veterans Benefits Workshop. We have about 4 this month and about 5 next month. And we're going to talk about some very important benefits if you're a veteran. If you're a wartime veteran, you could be eligible for up to $24,000 a year, tax-free, to help offset any assisted living, nursing home, or home health care for wartime veterans. These benefits are huge. And if you're younger, and you're looking at long-term care insurance, this could be a great supplement to help offset some long-term care expenses when you get up to your parents' age. If you have a parent that's in their 80s or 90s and that are paying for assisted living expenses, make sure that they are receiving these benefits if they're a widow of a veteran or a veteran themselves. And again, you can check out more information on those events at SWAN-Capital.com. And while you're there, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and sign up for our weekly market update so you can stay on top of what's going on in the market. Now, like I promised, today's show is about beneficiary designations. We're going to talk about making sure that your estate plan has all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. Because when it comes to the legal part of your financial plan, you want to make sure that you have all the details sewn up. Because when you've passed, it's just too late, unfortunately. And it comes down to a fundamental question. When I check out of this world, will everything go as I planned for it? Well, there's a couple responses to that question. Some families, they care. They want to make sure that, they worked their entire life to build up this nest egg. And if they're not able to enjoy all of it, they want to make sure that their spouse, their charity, and their kids enjoy every dollar that they built up for them. Now, some families don't care. They say, well, Andrew, I'm 6 feet under. I won't care about the money I leave behind me. But I think that's a shame because you worked so hard to build it up. And it'd be a shame to have the government eat it away through taxes or an attorney charge fees to help you go through the probate process when it could have been easily avoided. And the last one, and this is the ones I want to get to the most, is some care, but it's just not urgent enough to take action. It's not urgent enough to look into. And I want to show you just the importance of what it is to make sure that your beneficiary designations are sewn up. And this is a fabulous article. I'm glad I stumbled across it. It's from the New York Post, and it's called The Pension Pickle. And it came out a few years ago, so it's not a new article. It's been around for a while, but it just really solidifies how important it is to get your beneficiary designations on your retirement accounts right. Now, if you're just tuning in, this is What Your Money Would Say, and I'm your host, Andrew McNair. And remember, this show is live, so you can call in at 478-3116 if you have any questions about what we're going to discuss today. But the article is The Pension Pickle, and it's a Brooklyn man that had lost over $1 million to his in-law. And here's the backstory is, his wife was working for the state, and she was entitled to a lump sum pension payment of $1 million if she passed away. And she, unfortunately, after 20 years of marriage to her husband, she never indicated a beneficiary. And unfortunately, because of a technicality and because they never checked it through those 20 years of marriage, they never checked the designation on her pension. It went to her closest relative, which was her sister. And it talks about in this article that his sister didn't give him a penny of what should have been his. And by law, he has no leg to stand on. So he lost out on $1 million that I know from reading the article that she would have wanted to go to him because that's what they worked so hard to accrue. They accrued this nest egg to enjoy for the rest of the life and live happily ever after retirement. But unfortunately, life happens and it didn't work out. And when she passed, all the money went to her sister. And what's sad is over 20 years, how easy of a change would that have been to make sure that the beneficiary designation on her retirement accounts and more importantly, her pension was done right. And that's, as a financial advisor, that's our role, is to also make sure that validate that you've done that. And sadly, I have so many families that come into my office and life has happened, but there are documents that happen with it. They didn't go and change them. So I just want to show you that these are real life situations, and we think that will never happen to us, but unfortunately it does. So you can check out this article at SWAN-Capital.com. We have it from the New York Post, and it's under the free white papers page. So check that out. All right. So we understand that this is real life, and if we don't change our beneficiary designations, there can be some huge consequences. But I want to, probe you with a good question. And is that when you sat down with your biannual review with your financial advisor and you went through his beneficiary review where he pulled out all of your investment accounts and made sure that every designation was up to date and was how you liked it, were you comfortable with the process when he did that? Were you comfortable with how that process went? Now, many families didn't go through that process. And I think that's a shame because what a great process that is to go through with your financial advisor to make sure that all the accounts you have, every investment you have is synergistically works together to make sure that you leave the legacy that you planned on. And that's what we pride ourselves at SWAN-Capital in doing. We sit down as just one of the proactive services we do for our client is a beneficiary review. And we make sure that all their investment accounts line up accordingly to what they want so that we'll avoid probate and avoid paying extra taxes to the government that we shouldn't have to pay if we just don't procrastinate. So why is it so important to get this beneficiary review done? First and foremost, as we've repeated multiple times through the show, is life happens. Sometimes, God forbid, a spouse passes. We lose a child. Maybe we gained a child. Maybe we had a child 10, 12 years ago, and we never updated our documents. What a great, perfect time today is to make sure that your documents are up to date with what has happened over the last 5 years. The second thing, time changes. And that means relationships can change. You may draw further and farther apart from a different relationship, but you've never updated your documents to go along with that. And the third point on what I want to say, why beneficiary reviews are so important, is that they're the highest law in the land. Now, when I get to this discussion with clients and families, they say, well, Andrew, we don't even have to talk about that. I have a will, and it's all been laid out for my family. The problem with that is beneficiaries designations are the highest law in the land, which means if I have a will that says, my 3 kids are going to get everything equally. However, my life insurance says, no, only one child is going to get that asset, or my spouse is going to get that. It bypasses and trumps the will. And many families are unaware of that. And sometimes I catch that they say 2 different things. The beneficiary designation says this, and the will says this. So what's nice is when we can make them work together to make sure that they have a sewn up estate plan. So you want to make sure that the highest law of the land doesn't work against you, because beneficiary designations are great because they can help you bypass probate in a lot of situations. But if they're not set up accurately, it could leave your family in financial disarray. And just like that article we went over, what a horrible thing it is to lose a spouse. But what even more terrible it is to lose not the financial assets that she was supposed to leave behind for him goes away as well. And it's a shame. And it doesn't have to be that way. And the last is you can save some money. If you set up your beneficiary designations and you're titling accurately, you can save yourself and your family money. Because if you don't, you're going to have to go through the probate process, which is a court of law. And anything with a court of law is kind of like Marine. It costs a premium. It's not free to go through the court system. You have to find an attorney, and it can be up to 3% of your estate to handle probate. So you want to make sure you can bypass that as often as you can. So if you're just tuning in on What Your Money Would Say, we're talking about beneficiary designations and making sure that we get it right while we still have a chance to get it done. And here are some of the common mistakes I find out. And the first one is the wrong person. Like I just explained to you, they may have the beneficiary designation saying one thing, but the trusts or their wills say 2 different things. You would hate to find out, God forbid, when you pass, that something happened to you just like the pension pickle. Instead of making sure your spouse got what you set aside for, something else happened entirely different. The next common mistake is per stirpes versus per capita. And we're going to go over that in detail. Many families just go with what we call basic. They go with per capita designations. And I'm going to share with you why that's so crucial in getting it correct. You may want it to go per capita, but you may want it to go per stirpes. And we're going to straighten out those Latin words for you. The next thing is they have no TOD or POD done correctly, which stands for transfer on death or payable on death. They've never set those up. So the bank or the accounts don't have the accurate beneficiary designations on them. So you want to make sure that's done accurately, because that can help you bypass the probate. And the next thing is messing up investments. There's many of strategies that are available, like that we're going to talk about, in particular, the stretch IRA. If you don't set up the beneficiary designation right, you could lose that estate of planning concept. So we're going to talk about that shortly after our break. And we'll talk about per stirpes versus per capita.
What your money would say. Today's financial landscape can be rough. One of the most important aspects of planning is choosing the right guide to help you navigate the road to retirement. Andrew McNair and the team at SWAN-Capital is dedicated to providing the very best service in the retirement planning industry today. SWAN-Capital is a full-service independent wealth management firm dedicated to providing guaranteed custom income plans that you cannot outlive. Contact Andrew McNair at SWAN-Capital 850-380-9558. That's 850-380-9558. The difference between SWAN-Capital and you retire once. We help people retire every day. You should be enjoying your retirement years, not letting worry keep you up at night. SWAN-Capital. Sleep well at night. Contact Andrew McNair at SWAN-Capital, 850-380-9558. That's 850-380-9558. Again, that's 850-380-9558.
The Veteran Benefit Project, founded by Andrew McNair, president of SWAN-Capital, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping veterans and widows of veterans with long-term care expenses by qualifying for the VA's Aid and Attendance Benefit. Learn how to receive over $24,000 per year from the VA towards long-term health care. There is absolutely no fee associated with our assistance to the veteran, the widow of a veteran, their families, or any retirement community. Our goal is to preserve the dignity of the veteran and to reduce the dependency on the Medicaid system. Again, learn how to receive over $24,000 per year from the VA. Contact the Veteran Benefit Project, 850-380-5137. That's 850-380-5137. 850-380-5137. Look us up on the web, veteranbenefitproject.com. At the Veteran Benefit Project, we are committed to helping you secure the benefits you deserve.
Retirement expert Andrew McNair. Changing the retirement paradigm. Now back to what your money would say. Brought to you by SWAN-Capital.
Welcome back to What Your Money Would Say. We're talking about, on What Your Money Would Say, beneficiary designations and making sure that your estate plan is done exactly how you want it to. Because when it comes to estate plan, you want to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And this is one of those things that sometimes falls through the cracks, that sometimes life happens, but our investment accounts and our designations don't change with it. So it's my job as a financial advisor to make sure that my clients have their beneficiary designations match what they honestly want to happen when they check out of this world. And if you have any questions about beneficiary designations or your estate plan, give us a call at 850-478-3116. That's 478-3116. And we'll be happy to answer your call and your question. The thing what we talked about where I left off is per stirpes versus per capita. Now, many times families set up their investment accounts to go per capita. And what per capita means is, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have 4 children, and each goes 25% to each one. But unfortunately, sometimes this happens. A child passes away before their parent does. And instead of it going 25, 25, 25, now there's only 3 children. So what was going to go to that one child gets spread among the other children. So now they're getting 33, 33, and 33%. Now many families say, well, stop, I don't want it to do that. That might be set up like that, set up initially like that, but not many people I find out want it like that. The opposite is called per stirpes. And why they prefer per stirpes is because, God forbid, a child passes away. It doesn't say 25, 25, 25, 25, and then switches to 33% for each child after one passes away. No, what happens is 25% goes to each child like it did before. But when that son or daughter passes, it goes to the lineage of that child so that your grandchildren don't lose out on what their parents would have got. And what I find is many times they want it to go per stirpes, but it was set up per capita, and then they just said they never looked into what the difference was. And so I find that big defect in a lot of estate plans. So if you're just tuning in on what your money would say, we're talking about beneficiary designations. We talked about per stirpes, and then we're going to talk about stretch IRAs or stretch Roth. This is why it's so imperative in getting your beneficiary designations set up accurately. If you don't, you could lose out on some very neat estate planning concepts, such as a stretch IRA. Basically what happens is, when you get over 70 years old, you're going to have to start taking your RMDs, your required minimum distributions. So the government makes it mandatory to take out person passes away. If they don't set up the beneficiary designation right, you could lose what we call the stretch IRA provision. And this is how it works. You can have 2 options here. You can say, let's say we have our spouse as our beneficiary of our IRA. Well, then that RMD goes based on their lifetime. See, a required minimum distribution is based on that person's lifetime. So if you have your beneficiary as your spouse, then she is the one that's going to go off her life, which, let's say we have $500,000 in IRA. She's going to get $20,000 a year that she has to take from her RMD if it's a substantial IRA. Or you can use the stretch IRA provision, which means you can have the beneficiary set up maybe as your son or your granddaughter, which would stretch out the RMD payments, allowing you to making a mandatory distribution less than it would if it was your spouse. So again, I'll give you the example. We have a large IRA. We have to take out $20,000 a year if we make your spouse the beneficiary. But what if we made your granddaughter the beneficiary and the RMD is only maybe $6,000? Well, that gives your family the flexibility to say, hey, the minimum we have to take is $6,000, but we could take $20,000, but we have the option, which allows us flexibility when taxes are higher or lower. We have flexibility. So that's how a stretch IRA provision works, and you want to make sure that your beneficiary designation doesn't inhibit that. Now, we have a phone call come in with Brenda. Brenda, welcome to What Your Money Would Say.
Thank you.
Brenda, what's your question? How can we help you today?
I got in on the tail end of the show, and I was wondering, why isn't it good to be on your parents' checking account and savings account?
Okay, so what you're asking is, why isn't it a good decision to have your name on maybe a potential parent's checking account? And we briefly talked about that in the beginning of the show. The problem with having your name on a parent's checking account or a savings account, which I commonly see so many families do, Brenda. Many families come in with their parent and they say, hey, I'm set up as a joint owner on my parent's checking account. The problem with that is it sounds easy. It sounds like, you can always take out, some money to help pay for your mom's bills. But the problem lies in is, God forbid you got in a car accident, Brenda. Brenda, you still drive, right?
Oh, yes.
If you're still driving and you get in a car accident, that could be low-hanging fruit for an attorney to come and pick off. And you might say, well, Andrew, I set up that side of the money for my parent. Well, the attorney's not going to, they're not going to care. So you want to make sure that you don't increase the liability on your parents' accounts by making yourself a joint owner. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I'll go on Monday and change that.
All right, Brenda, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Brenda had a fantastic question. Many times what we think makes financial sense, we have to challenge. We have to make sure that we don't get in just a decision of making these decisions haphazardly. And many families come into my office saying, you know what, I want to make this easy. I want to make sure that if my mom needs to pay some bills and she's incapable of doing it because, God forbid, she has a stroke or she's suffering with an illness like a UTI and she's lost a lot of mental strength, what do I do if I'm not a joint owner? Well, that's when you need to have a power of attorney set up. A power of attorney gives you the ability, if someone's incapable of making those financial decisions while they're alive, having someone step in and help them make those decisions. So what a fantastic question, Brenda. Now, if you're just tuning into What Your Money Would Say, we're talking about beneficiary designations. And we talked about why it's so important. And the first reason was life happens, and you have to happen with it. You have to be able to change with the times. And there's plenty of songs on you got to change with the times. Next thing is time changes relationships. And you might get closer to a relative or get farther away from a relative relationship-wise. And you need to move those accordingly. You need to change the beneficiaries accordingly. So you don't want to have an inch full of dust on those documents and not have it go the way you planned on it when you pass. The next is the highest law in the land. You want to make sure that you get the beneficiary designations right because they can trump other legal instruments that you've written up. You might have a trust and a will say one thing, but if your beneficiary designations are not synergistic, it can trump those documents and the intentions and the desires that you wanted. So you want to make sure that you avoid that. And the last is save money. You want to make sure that you save money and avoid some probate costs if you can. And utilizing, trusts, PODs, and TODs, you can do that. And I want to talk about TODs. Basically, TOD stands for transfer on death. And you can set that up at your checking account, your savings account. And what that does is it makes you bypass probate because it sets up a beneficiary. And as we know, a beneficiary designation is the highest law in the land. So you want to make sure that that's set up accurately and how you plan for it to go. POD is payable on death. It happens about the same way, but sometimes different banks, different institutions have different terminology. So you just understand that they're very similar. Now, when it comes to property, we have what we call a state that doesn't do a TOD deed. What you have to do is set up what we call a ladybird deed. And this is basically an enhanced life estate plan. And what it does is it sets up the TOD or joint ownership for the property so that when, God forbid, you pass, that the property doesn't get caught up in the probate process. However, it would bypass the probate and go to the beneficiaries. And again, working with an attorney and a financial advisor is the best way. I pull in my attorneys that I have a great relationship with constantly, because what I have found is many families go to an attorney and they make some decisions. Then they go to their wealth manager and then they make some decisions. And then they go to their insurance person and make those decisions. And they never have a game plan of pulling it all together. And that's the real great thing of 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. If you do it right, you can have 1 + 1 = 3 and have a very good synergistic game plan for your financial plan. And it goes back to the fundamental questions. When I check out of this world, does my plan encapsulate all the desires I have for my legacy? And that's a question that I hope that we've encouraged you to look at, to challenge what your financial plan is currently set up and make sure that everything is up to date. Because like we talked about in the beginning of the show, is you don't want to be caught up in the pension pickle or the beneficiary pickle. Like that man was that spent 20 years with his wife. And unfortunately, when she passed, he didn't receive $1 out of the $1 million he was entitled to, but it went to the sister-in-law. I can promise you that was an awkward Thanksgiving. And you don't want to leave your family in that same situation. We want to make sure that it's a peaceful transition. When you pass, that there's enough emotional stress and enough things that you have to deal with, burying a loved one, that you don't want to worry about the financial side. So again, thank you for tuning into What Your Money Would Say, and we look forward to seeing you on next week's show.